Hi, my name is Jude Swire-Clark, and today I'll be interviewing Ginger Swire-Clark, aka my mother, for the Diverse Cultures of Music class. Alright, so the first question we've got today is, what influenced your music taste growing up?
So I think there were a couple of different influences to my music taste growing up. The first one was probably a pretty strong Caribbean influence. So a lot of kind of salsa music, a lot of merengue. And then we would listen to the radio in the car or have our separate sort of Walkman boombox. So, we could really pick whatever local radio stations you wanted to listen to. So I think growing up, there was a lot of sort of 80s rock, pop, even a little bit of some 80s ballads that I love.
Sorry, could you repeat that last thing you said? Sorry.
Which part?
After the rock ballads.
Ballads. I think just having parents who allowed us to listen to the type of music that we wanted to listen to, I think that gave us the opportunity to pick the music that really impacted us, or sometimes that might have even been classical music.
It just depends on the day.
It's just in a mood and who you were with. The group, if you're with friends, it was probably much more 80s rock pop. And, if you're kind of by yourself or studying, it might have been classical music.
For sure. All right. Should we move on to the next one?
Yes, please.
Okay. Have you ever performed in a concert?
Yes, I have performed in a number of concerts. I sang in junior high and high school. Performed in a number of choral concerts through high school. And then I joined the band. I started off on flute, and I continued with flute all the way through high school and early into college. And then I also picked up the baritone or the euphonium, the concert euphonium. So I decided that marching piccolo may not have been as fun, because it seemed like the low brass folks were having a great time. So I switched from marching a piccolo to learning the baritone. That was a fun switch. The low brass section was awesome. They're always very chill and not super stressed and not as competitive either. So I marched baritone all throughout the rest of high school and then into the college marching band at UNC Chapel Hill. And then when I was in college, I played in the symphonic band. I played euphonium, and we had the opportunity to perform in Carnegie Hall, which is an incredible experience, along with all of the other concerts that we performed throughout, in the fall or spring semesters. And then since then, I've participated in a couple of community bands and orchestras. That was probably many years after having children when we had a little bit more free time. So that's been fun, kind of to pick up the flute again and be able to play in those community groups.
Okay, that kind of segues into my next question, but
Great.
Have you had any experience playing instruments? Obviously, that is covered.
I have had a lot of, I didn't include that I actually started on piano. So I started, my mom felt like it was really important for us to have basics in music. And so I started taking piano lessons in second grade, and I continued all the way through 12th grade. And then I started flute lessons in seventh grade, and I started taking euphonium lessons as an 11th grader. I started taking. So, but I will tell you that having the fundamental basics of music reading and rhythm and the theory that goes along with that really allowed me to pick up playing these other instruments. And it just became about the fingering and how the embouchure, how to play the instrument. And I didn't have to start all the way from scratch. And, as a seventh or eighth grader learning, how much time does a quarter note have, learning about key signatures and other things, because I already knew how to read music. So I will say that I did complain a lot about taking piano lessons, but I'm really grateful that my parents encouraged me to stick with it, because I've been able to continue playing and perform adult life.
Well, that is great. On to the next question. How do you feel about current music, and how do the themes from past music compare to today's music?
How do I feel about music today? I find that music today, I feel like it's very different from when I was growing up, and I'm sure that every generation probably says that. But I feel like we've moved away from sort of the listen on the radio, where the radio DJ picks the music and you never know what's coming up, to things like Pandora and Spotify and Amazon Music, where you can really select the exact type of music or the artist that you want to listen to, and you can really hone in and just listen to that, or you can pick artists that are similar to the type that you want. You have the opportunity to really focus in on, like, and the one thing I don't necessarily like about it is that you don't have the opportunity to be exposed to music outside of what you know that you like. So maybe you really like Taylor Swift and the type of music that she plays and sings, and so you find a couple of artists who are similar, and that's all you listen to. Well, that's great, and she's a very talented musician and artist. But what if there are other musicians whose music you might never hear, simply because you've kind of selected this is the very specific category or artist that you like? So that's one thing that I think, being able to listen to the video, rock or oldies or country or gospel, you just may not be exposed to other things that you might end up liking. And would you read that question to me one more time, just to make sure that I've answered that?
Yes, it says, how do you feel about current music, and how do the themes from past music compare to today's music?
In general, if I were to answer about how do I feel about today's music, I enjoy today's music. I also enjoy, kind of the older music that I grew up with. And what I feel like is happening is a lot of the themes from when I was growing up, I find repeat themselves again. So music that might have been kind of popular in the 80s, I think remains popular now, or they're doing variations on it, but I feel like you see these themes and other pieces coming back up over and over again.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
I'm not sure I answered that question.
I'd say you gave a good enough answer for me to understand. So okay, next question. How did your music taste change when you were transitioning from college to being an adult?
Wow, how did my music taste change? I would say I don't feel like my taste from being a college student, maybe into young adulthood. I think that we were pretty focused on, starting off with jobs and, or getting married and starting a family. And I found that I had a whole span of time where maybe I wasn't listening to the current music because I was listening to DVDs in the car of Dora the Explorer, or other things like that. So there was a point in time where I was really focused on what my children were interested in instead of the type of music that I might be interested in. And so it wasn't until maybe 20 plus years after graduating from college that I found that I was able to kind of listen to the music I wanted to listen to again. And I found that I still loved what I grew up with, kind of that 80s style, that pop, kind of music that continues. But I've also really enjoyed kind of the country kind of genre. So, and that's something that my dad really liked growing up, and I could not stand to listen to. Some of the older artists who were very popular in the 80s and the 90s. I just could not listen to country western then. But I found that now, many years after graduating, I really have kind of expanded. I really kind of enjoy that genre that I never thought I would enjoy.
I'm the same way. I didn't like country music for a long, long, long time, but now I am picky, but I do like some of it.
I do too. I don't like all of it, but I do find a couple of artists that I enjoy listening to.
Yes, me too. Okay. When you are stressed, what is a go-to song?
All right, I'm going to think on that for just a minute.
Okay. When you are stressed.
When I am stressed.
Or what's a go-to like genre of music?
I do like classical music. If I'm really stressed, it's better for me to not be thinking about the lyrics. Like, I really just want to kind of calm. Classical music is really good for that, at least for me.
You said calm. You said calm and what music?
Just kind of classical music for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not trying to think about the lyrics for a song. What are the words? Oh, I can't remember how that goes. Well, I don't need to. The classical music is, for me, very calming.
I would agree. I love classical music as well.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I think that will wrap it up.
Okay. That sounds good.
Thank you for your time and your background with music and sharing with me.
Of course.